Much has been said about Project 2025, the conservative playbook for Trump if he wins the election. And as a self appointed fact checker on issues of climate and energy policy, I thought I'd take a look at what it has to say on those issues. I reviewed their Mandate for Leadership section, which covers the Department of Energy and related commissions. As I reviewed the document, I found themes running throughout. A free market will solve all problems. The government should not support the commercialization of new technologies. Climate change is a hoax. America is suffering from energy scarcity. Renewables have led to higher costs and an unstable grid. And they have a bias towards oil and gas. To give a sense of the tone of the document, here's the third paragraph. The new energy crisis is caused not by a lack of resources, but by extreme green policies. Under the rubrics of combating climate change and ESG, the Biden administration, Congress, and various states, as well as Wall Street investors, international corporations, and progressive special interest groups, are changing America's energy landscape. These ideologically driven policies are also directing huge amounts of money to favored interests and making America dependent on adversaries like China for energy. In the name of combating climate change, policies have been used to create an artificial energy scarcity that will require trillions of dollars in new investments, supported with taxpayer subsidies, to address a problem that the government and special interests themselves created. So let's take a look at their logical fallacies. First, they assume that the market can solve every problem. This document worships the market and assumes that there are no externalities. That is, a free market will always choose the optimal solution. I guess these folks never studied basic economics. The tragedy of the commons is not some newfangled liberal economic theory, but goes back to at least Aristotle, who wrote, quote, "That which is common to the greatest number gets the least amount of care. Men pay most attention to what is their own, and they care less for what is common." And our atmosphere is an example of a commons, and polluting it with carbon dioxide is a tragedy in the making. Since the energy sector has enormous environmental impacts, without government regulation, we'll have schools blowing up, rivers catching on fire, and millions dying of air pollution. These aren't hypotheticals, but actual historical events that each led to increased regulation. And utilities are natural monopolies that provide critical services that can be a matter of life and death. Is it okay if they triple the price of electricity, even if it means that one third of households can't afford it? If a utility decides that providing electricity 20 hours a day instead of 24 will maximize their profit, is that acceptable? They want to eliminate appliance regulations, which is an incredibly boneheaded proposal. According to the Consumer Federation of America, energy efficiency standards have saved Americans over $1.5 trillion dollars, with less than $300 billion in costs, for a benefit to cost ratio of about 6 to 1. There are lots of problems with the way we regulate the energy sector, and I would support a top to bottom review looking for misaligned incentives and overly burdensome process. It shouldn't take nearly 20 years to build a transmission line, most of it dealing with regulations. But this review has to start with the understanding that government interference is necessary, but how do we do it better? Another fallacy is that the government shouldn't support new technologies. Governments have been supporting new technologies since there were governments and new technologies. In the mid 19th century, the US government granted extensive public lands to railroad companies to promote their construction and open up the West to settlement. GPS was developed by the military but transferred to civilian control and is the basis of Google Maps and hundreds of other applications. The civilian nuclear industry would never have launched if not for the Price-Anderson Act of 1957, which limited the liability of the reactor's owners in the case of a catastrophic accident. Project 2025 calls for eliminating several programs that support trials of grid enhancing technologies, which are the most cost effective way to improve the reliability of the grid. The US is already behind the rest of the world in these technologies, as I discussed in my episode on that topic. According to economist Mariana Mazzucato, author of The Entrepreneurial State Debunking Public versus Private Sector Myths, quote, every major technological change in recent years traces most of its funding back to the state. It's appropriate that the government support the development and commercialization of new, cleaner technologies that will replace the dirty and finite fuels of the past. It's said that the Stone Age didn't end because we ran out of stones, but because we invented better tools. It is reasonable to ask if the US taxpayers are getting a good payback from its supports of private companies. In other countries, the government gets a piece of the action in exchange for their support. And I think it's reasonable that this should be considered. The most demonstrably false assumption of the authors is that climate change is a hoax. Every scientific body that has studied the issue concludes that human caused climate change is real and a threat to civilization. American conservatives are among the last group on planet Earth to deny this, and it will require intervening in the market for us to address climate change. I believe that the reason that the authors of Project 2025 discount climate change is because they have no tools to address the problem, so they deny it exists, rather than question their foundational belief that an unrestrained market will solve every problem. Adam Smith understood the tragedy of the commons, even if the Project 2025 people don't. If the authors were economists instead of ideologues and lawyers for the oil and gas industry, they would suggest the policy that would encourage the energy transition by distorting the market appropriately without unnecessary regulation and subsidies. That's putting a price on emitting carbon. Most economists agree that a high and rising carbon cost is the most efficient way to reduce carbon pollution. Though I support a carbon cost, we need to look at all the barriers to the energy transition and make sure our regulatory environment is fit for purpose to supply clean, affordable, and reliable energy to all. Okay, the claim that America is suffering from energy scarcity might be even easier to disprove than that climate change is a hoax. Throughout the document, the authors state that because of actions taken to address climate change and a preference for renewable resources, that the US is suffering from energy scarcity. I'm old enough to remember lines at gas stations. That's energy scarcity. Go to sub-Saharan Africa to see what energy scarcity looks like. As we see in this map, the US is among the highest consumers of energy in the world, and we have among the lowest cost of electricity, gasoline, and natural gas in the developed world. The message of energy scarcity is sprinkled throughout the section without any basis in reality. If energy really was scarce, we wouldn't be the largest exporter of liquefied natural gas, with the industry clamoring to build even more export terminals, which I spoke about in this video. The authors claim, without any data, that renewables have led to higher costs and an unstable grid. This is one of those statements with truthiness. It sounds plausible, but it's actually not true. Utilities measure the cost of generating electricity using the levelized cost of electricity, or LCOE, which factors in issues like solar panels not working at night and wind turbines not working when it isn't windy. LCOE does not include storage or transmission. We see here that utility scale solar and onshore wind are both cheaper than natural gas, though the most efficient gas plants are close. Even including battery storage, renewables are less expensive than natural gas peakers, which can follow the load and are a fair comparison to renewables plus storage. And a grid with both wind and solar needs much less storage than one with just one or the other. And a grid that can bring in renewable power from areas with different weather needs even less storage. And unlike natural gas, the cost of solar power has been dropping rapidly. The cost of battery storage has dropped even faster. There are several chemistries in development that may replace the lithium chemistries for stationary use, dropping the costs even further and eliminating the use of critical minerals like cobalt and lithium. So there's every reason to expect that renewables plus storage will be cheaper every year. As we see in this chart from the Energy Information Agency, in 2024, the majority of new electricity capacity will be solar, which is intermittent, followed by batteries, which are doubly dispatchable, both as load and source. Third is wind. Natural gas is only 4% of new capacity. The direction that the grid is headed is solar, battery, wind. For more, you can watch my video on this topic. The authors have a clear bias towards oil and gas. Much of the Project 2025 proposals seem like they were written to protect legacy industries of oil and gas, who want to kill any competitors before they get on their feet. These new industries have the potential to be cheaper and cleaner than the status quo, but they can't compete with entrenched competitors on day one. For instance, the authors are fine with the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, or FERC, having the authority to cite gas and oil pipelines across the country against the desires of the state and local governments. But for some reason, FERC having the same authority to cite electrical transmission lines is governmental overreach and a subsidy to renewable developers. I have two theories on why Project 2025 supports the fossil fuel industry. One, their pockets are lined by oil and gas interests, or two, their reptilian overlords want to warm the planet as fast as possible to make way for their invasion. Let me know in the comments which of these theories makes sense to you, or if you have a different one. If we follow the policies laid out in Project 2025, our energy sector will be dirtier, more expensive, and less reliable. The US, with its plentiful wind and solar potential, is well positioned to lead the energy transition, but only if we reject the free market zealots who don't care about the future. To sum up, Project 2025 is based on lies that the market can solve all problems, that the federal government should have no role in introduction of new technologies, that climate change is manufactured by corporations and liberal interest groups, that the US is suffering from energy scarcity, and that our grid is unstable because of too many renewables like solar and wind. The truth is, the market won't provide a clean environment or affordable, reliable energy. The federal government has been midwife to many new technologies. Climate change is real. We have plenty of energy in the US, and we can build a 100% renewable grid that is affordable and reliable. If you disagree and think there are some good ideas in Project 2025, please share your thoughts in the comments. And if you learned something, please like and subscribe. And you can support my work by buying me a coffee. And please, please, please share this video with everyone you know who's undecided on how to vote this November, assuming you know anyone that's undecided.